Next, I think we need to move maybe to our superintendent's report, because I understand we have staff that are going to be taking off, but I don't see our superintendent. Does anybody know the status of our employee recognition? We got to make sure we. You want to do that tomorrow, Patty? Okay.
I think staff had to leave at 4, so that.
Okay, we may have missed it. We were trying to get there, but we may have missed it. All right. Okay, let us get then to, I think, our general, no, let's see. I think legislative, yeah, the general session legislative preparation. So first up, action item 10.1, Deputy Jones. We've got a question about the WPU, so take it away. I've got to step out for just a second.
Did he tell me?
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones on agenda item 10.1. Madam Chair, if you'll recall, the board did request that we provide some semblance of where we're at revenue-wise in the support of your decision-making process on the WPU percentage. So if you'll recognize Director Yuri and our economist, Dr. Rodriguez, to provide as much information and as quickly as possible. But again, in the interest of trying to make sure that you have as much information as possible at this date and time group. And I just have to caveat or condition that what we're about to present today is subject to change, and we won't know what we will know until we know when the legislative session starts and EAC, well, actually, when EAC makes their motions and for the base budget in December, and then when the legislative session starts. So if you'll recognize Director Yuri and Dr. Rodriguez, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And we appreciate all of your fortune-telling efforts. And if you will just hit your button so that I can activate your mic, that would be appreciated. There you are, gentlemen. And please introduce yourself. State your name for the record.
Yeah, Sam Uri, School Finance Director.
Nestor Rodriguez, economist.
So we do want to be clear that we have a couple items that we will get fairly soon, which is our inflationary number. If you'll recall, there's a 5-year rolling inflationary average that does subtract the food and energy inflation. Our current projections for USBE used about 3.58% for that number. It could be as high as about 4%. If you recall, it is statutorily required for the legislature to appropriate that percentage at least on the WPU. So that's an important piece of the puzzle to remember. Additionally, we will have more concrete revenue numbers as we go forward in the month. But as Deputy Jones has mentioned, a lot of what we have right now is kind of interim, subject to change, but just here to present some of those things. So if we can go to the last backup on this item. And I will turn the time over here to Dr. Rodriguez.
Hello, good afternoon, board. I'm going to go through some discussion with regard to WPU increase. Thanks. So just a general overview of the macroeconomy, so it gives us some perspective. So real GDP, the preliminary estimate came out about a month ago, so it's not maybe preliminary anymore. Second quarter real GDP increased at an annual rate of 2.1%, and that followed in line with the first quarter real GDP. This is national GDP at 2.0%. So pretty consistent. Next slide. So concerns, interest rates, as folks know, I'm sure interest rates are high as a result of the Federal Reserve, raising interest rates to try to quell inflation. Inflation still the Federal Reserve has a target about 2% inflation rate that they look at, and inflation remains above that 2% target rate. However, two key points here is that forecasts of inflation and consumer inflation expectations, which play a big role in inflation, are slated to start falling or been falling, but nevertheless still above this 2% in target rate. The labor force, as you've seen here probably, folks, when you go around town, you see help wanted signs, we're hiring. So this phenomenon continues, and there's a jobs number coming out tomorrow, for example, that folks in the markets are looking forward to. And again, it just seems that labor, the job markets are, as we would say, tight or just strong. And so the Fed is anticipating that these markets these excess openings will clear. Next slide. Consumers are cautious. This is in line with consumer sentiment numbers from the University of Michigan, showing, amongst other expectation measures, that consumers are expecting to be worse off. And then housing affordability, this area, amongst others, housing is still very pricey, and that coupled with mortgage rates being high because of higher interest rates have sort of dampened housing markets, not just here but across the board in other parts of the country. Next slide. So the Utah economy relative to the nation is still stronger, and we saw this during the pandemic. Although weaker than now, but still relative to the rest of the country, the Utah local economy was strong. And so there's the local economy still poised to fare better if the situation tightens, that being rates go up more or the economy slows. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Slide. So this is preliminary numbers from the revenue snapshot. This is the fiscal year 2023 preliminary numbers. And so the general and income tax funds revenues were up 11.5 billion. This was a year-over-year increase of 0.3%, which the target was 1.2%. So it was a little lower than what the target rate was. Slide. And then specifically the income tax fund, the year-over-year increase was negative 5.3%, and that target rate was negative 1.6%. So the income tax fund actually collected less than what was anticipated, negative 5.3 compared to the target, which was negative 1.6%. Next slide. So something to keep in mind is this is from the revenue snapshots that we get from the Utah State Tax Commission, is the last few months, if you see there, April, May, and June, tax collections, income tax collections have been negative year to year. So I'm pointing this out because we're going to, if there's be a slide, we'll compare this to 2022. As well, revenue collections compared to previous years, specifically 21 and 22, there is a forecasted range, and these are this year, the predicted preliminary number is actually in the range, low to mid range of this projected range. Next slide. Let's see. Yeah, so you really can't see it too well here, but it is in the board backup. As you can see, in 2022, thank you. In 2022, those numbers month to month are positive, as into July 22. And you also see that green condition on target. You see that the individual income tax was at 6.7 billion. The range there was 5.2 to 6.3. So not only was outside of range, it was above the range, considerably above the range. And so that's something to sort of keep in mind. That was in 2022. The next slide. In 2023, now you see those numbers, the income tax collection numbers, they, as I suggested earlier, negative. So there's a slowdown month to month leading to July of 2023. And so something to sort of compare to previous years, specifically 21 and 22. Not only that, but then if you look at the year-end forecast, the range was 5.5 to 7.3 billion dollars, and the actual collections, the preliminary number is 6.4 billion. So not only were we in the range, we were sort of in the, you could say the middle of the range, but low to mid part of that range. So unlike the last 2 years, collections, income tax collections were in the range, but on the low end of the range. Next slide. And so this is sort of showing you that those numbers, granted 2020 was probably pandemic effects, as you could see, although in the range, or in the low end of that range. That 2019, have revenue snapshot data available. 2021 and 22, as you could see, we were considerably above the range in 21, and in 22 still above the range. And now in 2023, we see that we're in the middle of this range, that being 5.9 to 7.3 billion. Then contrast that with the percentage change in WPU. So sort of to give you a sense of comparing what the change in the income tax fund has done versus the change in the WPU value. Next slide. And so then this is just a graphic showing you just this. And so you could see there, if you move it up a little bit more, so I could see, I just want to make sure. I can't see it from here either.
Zoom in.
Yeah, see the legend.
Can we zoom in just slightly?
Just want to make sure. Thank you. So the blues, the income tax fund collections, you see there was a drastic increase, good increase in terms of revenues in 2021. And then it fell, you're seeing this now in 2023 in WPU, that 6% increase. And so the average WPU changed, I think I have there 4%, but you get a sense of what that's been over the last, since 2019. Next slide. And so these are some of the considerations to think about. Revenue collections, the income tax fund, year to year was projected to be negative 1.6%. It was actually lower. And in turn, collections have stagnated over the last 3 months. So as Deputy Jones had mentioned earlier, of course, these numbers preliminary, and also things may change. And so, but what we've seen over the last, in April, May, and June, where the collections were falling. And then overall totals were in the low to middle of the range. Next slide. And so guidance since 2019, the average WPU percent change has been 4%. There's still, it may sound cliche-ish at this point, but this notion of economic uncertainty, if you've been paying attention, for example, what's been happening in markets over the last couple of days of volatility. The Utah economy, though, is stronger relative to the rest of the country. That seems to be paramount. It was in the pandemic, and it's forecasters, and it seems to be like that. It will be like that now. However, current inflation and inflation expectations are still playing a role. And then, of course, this recent monthly decline, like I had pointed out earlier, in the income tax fund. I think one more slide. Yep, that's the last slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have got questions, or were you, I'm sorry,
No, I'll answer any questions.
we want to go to questions next, or?
Questions, Chair.
Okay. We do have, let's flip up here and get the right order. Member Straight.
Yes, Chair. I've always wondered how do they determine this one-time versus ongoing money? I'd like to understand.
So let me take that to Deputy Jones. I could answer, but he would have to clean up the mess anyway. So let's start with Deputy Jones.
Director Uri.
Or Director Uri, either one. You bet.
Certainly, we've seen the Economic Stabilization Fund play into the amounts available in one-time funding. Typically, most of the other types of funds that we're typically when we're talking WPU, we're talking ongoing funding, right? And so most of what we're looking at with the income tax fund collections would be part of the ongoing discussion.
Could you maybe address the sources of funding and how those funnel in between, stabilization fund, income tax fund, especially as the income tax fund is now in question with the earmark, what are the buckets and how do those relate to ongoing versus one time? Again, I could explain, but I sometimes find that I've missed something.
Right.
Sam?
So certainly we've covered at length the importance of the income tax fund and it being earmarked for education. It's not that the legislature can't appropriate general fund items to education, but we have a state that needs roads and needs other things as well, and so having that income tax fund earmark has been important. The Education Stabilization Fund, most of that comes out of the 2020 general session and creating, those sorts of things that we saw with increased revenues. But I'm not sure we want to go too far into the weeds with this, but
Maybe just how is the stabilization fund funded? Just the basics. Where does that money come from? We have a stabilization fund that came out of the 2020 with Amendment G, right? Maybe just explain where that money comes from that goes into that fund and then how it comes out in one-time money. Please, oh, sorry, let me,
go ahead. Yeah, I was trying to pull something up from the state legislature's compendium of budget information, but let me see here. I can give you the URL, Kelsey. So if you go to cobi.utah.gov. Okay. All right, over there on the left, on the navigate tab, scroll up just a little bit. There we go. And then click on public education. Okay, and just click out of that menu. It'll give you a bar graph. Oh, actually, go back to that summary. I apologize. Yep. Perfect. Okay, so there on the left, you can see the revenue by source. So the income tax fund, of course, is the largest at $4.5 billion, and others of the sources. If you click on the financials tab at the top,
Chair, can I go diva and you turn my red light on, please?
let's see, there, did I get it? No? You're public, oh my gosh, do I need to kill?
I think just to cut to what you're talking about, the legislature built in a certain percentage of the amount of the income tax fund that will fund the economic stabilization account. It's a percentage amount that goes into the economic stabilization account. At some point, if that exceeds a particular dollar threshold, then that money becomes available for whatever, I don't know, line items or wherever they can put it in. I think the biggest difference is between so it's 15% of the income tax revenue growth. There's other appropriations as designated. The statutory cap is 11% of the Uniform School Fund appropriations to minimum school program. And then the use of the account balance is that one-time appropriations to support public education system right now, I mean, subject to, we're entering into that phase of the constitutional amendment. Ongoing to fund ongoing MSP appropriations in a downturn with those agreements or that particular requirement. Plus enrollment growth, plus the inflation adjustment that we alluded to earlier, which we're not set on that yet, but we estimate it'll be around about 4%. Then, I can get into the funding and appropriations, but I think what you were asking is, what is the source? But then, I wanted to make sure everybody was clear that at a certain point, based on the percentages of the income tax fund that go into the academic stabilization account, then we get into also aspects of what they're modeling or predicting revenue will be so that they can make decisions on what could be ongoing and what could be one-time. If there's, sufficient modeling or revenue estimates that they could sustain an ongoing amount for the WPU and or ongoing programs, then that's typically how they see it, and that's the decision-making process that is made. You'll hear quite a bit that there's a lot of one-time money. A lot of that results from what Nestor pointed out was, we had these periods of considerable revenue coming in from the income tax. But then as you see the declines in there, that makes it even more difficult to fund ongoing and sustain ongoing requests. So it's a balancing act between that. But, I just want to make sure you were clear on the percentages and then also the decision-making process that goes in based on prior year revenue receipts and what's estimated to come in is a major part in the decision-making process on what makes it ongoing and there. And then subject to, of course, the laws and the percentage caps, I guess, or amount. So did you have anything to add to that?
Am I on? Apologies. Yeah, just as Deputy Jones has mentioned, a lot of times the one-time funds, other than the Education Stabilization Fund, are those that are deemed as a surplus or maybe more risky to use as an ongoing appropriation. So we certainly advise LEAs not to count on one-time money as ongoing. We hope that we do a good job of that, and we feel like the majority of LEAs take that into consideration, but it certainly, even things like the educator professional hours are not ongoing at this point, and it does seem a little bit, now that it's been around for 2 years, that maybe if the legislature doesn't fund that next year, educators will be, what do you mean that doesn't exist anymore? So those are some of the things that we take in as consideration there. So
Thank you. I do have a couple lights. Member Wood. Oh. There you go.
I have a question for Dr. Rodriguez. Is that?
Yes.
So you mentioned that there was an expected 1.6 decrease in our revenues. How does that play with the $400 million that was a tax cut? Was the 1.6 decrease expected because of the tax cut, or was this a negative 1.6 in addition to what we were already knowing would not come in due to the $400 million tax cut?
And I could find out with the Utah State Tax Commission, because these are their numbers from their revenue snapshot, and get back with you and answer that.
I'd
Figure out what
appreciate,
because that's straight from their.
there would have been a bottom line
Mhm.
where we know this much less has to come in,
Mhm.
but where's that difference? Thank
Right.
you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question on that? Unless I'm wrong, we still bring in the same amount, but the rate stays at the amount we brought in from the year before. Is that inaccurate? We bring in the same amount of money, the rate may float up or down. Where we're not holding the rate at the higher level, we aren't bringing in an additional amount. We are bringing in the same amount from the previous year. Am I off on that?
Are we talking basic rate for local
Yeah.
tax revenue versus income tax?
Okay, right, okay, right. Sorry, sorting it all out. But is that impacting, okay, never mind.
Go ahead.
Chair Moss, could you turn
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I think you're public too. Did that get, there we go.
Yeah, you're correct, Member Earl, on the basic rate side. This is income tax, and so it's a little bit different, but certainly we want to make sure that we have the full picture of the year, and want to note that these are preliminary numbers, but
Member Straight?
Oops,
Oh,
sorry.
nope, nope. Oh,
We're
you
good
got-
now.
you got it.
We're on. Thank you. So,
Where's Molly?
we do know that 41 million represents one WPU. Do we have any idea what the current projections are dollar-wise for ongoing and one time?
Thank you. I'll direct that to Deputy Jones or his designee. Okay.
So at this point, Chair, to answer Board Member Straight's question through you, is no, we don't know. Typically, EAC will be the one that decides how much they give to each committee, right, for PEA of ongoing and or one-time money. So it goes back to your original question, or I mean, maybe Chair Moss's original question is, how is it determined whether or not they provide one-time money? Again, just to emphasize or to be clear, a lot of the one-time money comes out of surpluses from prior years. There's some risk factors that are calculated into it too, and then they decide. Then EAC provides PEA, Public Education Appropriations Committee, with a particular amount. Hey, here's how much you can plan on for ongoing, and here's how much you can plan on for one time, and we do not have those numbers yet, but we will. So, does that answer Board Member Straight's question, sir? Well, right, yeah. So the
answers
answer is
to
no.
what we
sir,
know,
yeah.
yeah.
Not yet, not
Right,
yet.
okay.
yeah, the dollar amounts.
Right. We won't really know the dollar amounts till December, till after the EAC meeting in December, so.
So with respect to the one-time versus ongoing, as I understand, there is no statutory categorical restriction of any particular funding source for one-time money only. It is a decision that it would be very imprudent to spend things like surpluses or the money diverted to the, why am I blanking, the surplus emergency fund? Well, the rainy day fund and then also Amendment G fund, stabilization fund, sorry. Right, okay, those can be used for either purpose, but prudence indicates that this is basically surplus money or diverted money, so that's what's available for one time. And your ongoing income tax rolling amount, that's where you go with your ongoing fund. Is that basically accurate conceptually? Because I think that's always our concern, is we're trying to figure out what to propose as one-time and ongoing. What's that based on, right? What is their capacity to pay based on? So similar to ESSER money that we rolled out, you're not going to want to use that ongoing because ESSER's closed. And so similarly, stabilization fund, that kind of money is not an ongoing dependable funding source. Okay. So I guess we're looking for a motion then, right, Deputy Jones, in the way of a WPU proposal? Do you have recommendations or suggestions or ranges of what would be reasonable, feasible, et cetera, for us to consider, or should we just start the discussion and then look to you for any questions?
In an effort to provide as much information of where we're at this state time group, we tried to show you the trends. If you're going to take anything away from the presentation that Dr. Rodriguez did, it would be those slides that show or demonstrate that, hey, at a certain percentage of collections has resulted in a certain, has correlated with a certain increase in the WPU percentage by the legislature, with it being a 4% average over the last, 5 years? 5 years. 5 years. So that's our intent here. We could provide our own personal recommendations on it. We work closely with the LFA. We work closely with GOPB. We are hearing that this is going to be a year where there's limited funding available, not just for public education, but for the state as a whole, based on what their predictive values are and those types, and how much revenue has been brought in before. So if you take the correlations that we tried to give you, that should help you as a body try to determine as much as possible, given the limited information that you have, to come up with a particular percentage that you want to recommend as part of your the requirement that you have to provide to the governor's office under the Budgetary Procedures Act. However, as we get closer or into December and into the legislative session, that doesn't mean that you won't have another opportunity to amend how much you do, because you'll know more than you know now at that time to make even more of a decision. So my recommendation to you is just to take as much as you can possibly of what we've given you, and as a body, try to decide based on your experience. I would be remiss if I didn't ask that you consider what the JLC had provided. Many board members asked for that. Some may feel that that's too much, but keep in mind too that part of the 13.5% was 1.5% if they got rid of general and curricular fees, if the legislature did that too. So all those types of considerations, we really do try to give those to you so that you can make as an informed decision as possible. If you want me to make a recommendation to you, I will, but you're going to have to ask me specifically for that.
Let me ask you a more descriptive rather than
Okay.
kind of normative question, because we're going to decide what we want to ask for and what we want to press for, right? And so I guess in terms of looking at the slides and how the correlation, as you indicated, between income tax revenue and WPU increase, I was sort of trying to follow that, and I think that's what you're suggesting is that we're not bound by that.
No.
So, but where does that, where would that indicate it might fall, just as more predictive than a normative statement, given the current situation of income tax? Where does that kind of, and I guess part two of that, which of these numbers include growth and inflation that's now sort of baked in, and which would be additional? Is that something you can answer without sort of taking a position, more just of a descriptive statement?
Chair Moss, if I may, with the inflation adjustment, somewhere around 4%, pretty close to 4%, and a revenue outlook that is probably lower than the past 3 years. Even 1 or 2% above that of inflationary increase is kind of a high watermark for where we've been. Even last year, even with the amazing revenue that we had, it was 6%. We do know that they increased the educator salary adjustment with that, but again, we don't want to really force your hand or give you anything that you have to run with, but anything, it feels like an ask over 2% above inflation. Anything above that would be hard to find the revenue for.
That's helpful, and that's again just descriptive rather than
And that's
giving us directive. But
and
I
that's not
appreciate
just our opinion. That's us interfacing with the Legislative Fiscal Analyst's Office and the GOPB folks, the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. So, again, we would all love, 20%, but that's just looking at the numbers that we've been able to look at. So
that's helpful. Could you repeat that, Sam?
it's hard to envision anything above 2% above inflation. So about 6%. We're figuring about 4% on the inflationary adjustment.
And what about, I guess growth is kind of baked in now, correct, up front? So that's okay.
Correct.
All right, Member Straight, you've had a light on. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's fine.
wanted to-
I love to hear you speak. I like to speak. I like to speak as well, but, so I'd like to make a motion, and I'd like to speak to it once if I have a second.
You bet.
So, I move that we adjust the JLC, priorities, with the weighted pupil unit, overall increase of 13.5%, broken down in the following: 8% for LEA flexibility to address employee compensation, program expansion, LEA operational needs and innovation, in addition to the inflationary factor, which is 4% for the inflationary factor as by Utah code. And lastly, the 1.5% if the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees.
Okay, is there a second? Second from Member Lear. Back to you, Member Straight. Discussion to the motion.
Thank you. I realize that that 8% number is probably going to be adjusted, but I don't know what I don't know because I don't know what I don't know. And as far as the projections, we do have some ideas. There has been some direction about where we're headed, but I think there's a principle here of collaboration with JLC. We've known what their look is for some time. That 8% probably won't stay there, but last year we had an issue where we really needed to fund all of education, not just teachers. Now, teachers, of course, they are at the center and the heart of our education system. And it's important to realize that extra money in that 8% area, WPU, that's what funds everything in the schools. Busing, whatever it is, paraprofessionals of all different sorts. And so, yes, the 4%, I think that's probably pretty safe. That's what we've been promised. At a minimum. The curricular fees, I like the way this is put in here. As we get closer and we understand more, some things will come and some things will go. But at least we keep this on the front burner. I think this is the third year in a row that we've looked at these fees. And just like anything else, whether it's all-day K or other different programs that we have, Beverly Taylor Sorensen, others, as we put these things forward and move forward, eventually we get it funded. As you notice, kindergarten is not one of our priorities this year. Why? We've met that objective. And so things change, times changes, we can adjust as we go, but I would rather start high than start low. Thank you.
Okay, Member Booth.
Okay, so I guess my question is, what would you say the WPU was last year? Okay, 6%. But when it came out and we heard 6%, then the legislature announced kind of this equivalency WPU, and it all lumped together in the public's mind and in a lot of people that may be just slightly less informed than this body that's surrounding the table. And so the word on the street was, no, they got not 6%, but maybe 18%. And I even heard down in NEBO circles, 21%. And they start lumping all these different, and that was coming from a legislator. And so I just want to call apples apples and oranges oranges, and I just, at least for our decision-making process, I think it would be helpful for us to realize that when we're talking WPU, we're talking about the 4% plus 2% or whatever amount we agree upon, but there'll be a lot of people that will be thinking of WPU as who knows what, way up there. And maybe we need to be more specific and talk WPU equivalency, funding, and the real WPU, which is just, what the LEAs have to survive on. and just be a little more clear, because whatever we decide and whatever we're asking for, it's going to kind of just be subsumed in this bigger picture, it seems, at least historically, and I can't imagine it's going to be much different in the future. So I'd just like us to be clear here, so that when we're making the ask, we know what we're asking and we realize that it's a part of a much bigger picture. And in the minds of a lot of people, there's a lot of blurred lines, and we got to hold fast to what we've absolutely got to have, or public education is in trouble. So that was kind of a question, and then I don't know what it was, but good luck on helping us sort that out.
All right, thank you, Member Booth. Member Davis, and then Member...
Can Superintendent Jones answer?
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to respond? Please.
So my understanding is it is a question by the board member, so sir, through you, we'd have to go back and look at, the reasoning behind it. What I anticipate, what we heard like 18%, I think that whoever was saying it was pretty good about saying, well, it's the equivalent of, if you take 41 million as a 1% increase on the value of the WPU, and then you equate all that to, that's, I think, where they were coming from. I'm not sure, but let's see. One thing that I would like to say about this process, and it has proven to be a pretty good process, is I'll just remind you that, yes, according to the law, you have to submit your proposals to the governor's office, and we're going to do that, right? Because next we're going to talk about your rankings. What's good about this, though, and what I said earlier, is when when the legislature has the EAC meeting, that's in December. You meet early in January and before, typically before the gavel drops, right? So once we have that information, then you can always come back to it and see where, how things are. By then, too, you will have seen the governor's proposal, right? The roll-up of all the different agencies that he has to account for. They have to do and apply the revenue, because by law, we're required to balance the budget. So there's still time. So even if you come up with a percentage today to propose to the governor, you would still have an opportunity when we have more information to adjust to that. And then we can also make sure that you're clear on if there's a change from 41 million, say that it's 43 million, that's 1% of the value of the WPU, we'll make sure you know that too. So did I answer Board Member Booth's question, or
Member Booth?
Expand on his thoughts on that? Okay.
I see you nodding, so thank you. Member Davis,
May I ask, Chair, a question of the motion maker?
you bet.
Why would we ask for the 4% inflationary factor? It's already done, and we lost a lot. We used to have the education fund, and in order to get the thing that's already done, so we didn't have to beg to get to zero every year, we wedged the door open for the education fund to become the income tax fund, to open up to be shared with children with disabilities, now potentially to be opened up to be shared with the whole world. So we lost a lot, and we're getting little. And so why are we, why would we ask? It's like we got nothing if we go back and ask for this, because it's already done. And last time we had a meeting, this is a long question. Now, may I speak to the motion for a second? Because last time we met, we broke those out, and we broke it out to the 8% and just asked for the 8% WPU. And we worded it in the same way it is worded here, because at the end it says, in addition to the inflationary factor.
Okay, is that a question for Member Straight then? Go ahead. There we go.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. I think it's a matter of communication. And I'm not sure which communication is best, because if I remember right, we've added those two things together before as well. And we did that. I think it's better to separate them out, but it might even be, to your point, better to just leave it off. And just ask for the 8%, but I'm not quite certain. I'm not sure which one's the better strategy, or if it matters. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. If it does matter, I definitely want to do with what would work best. But if I remember, I thought last year we combined the two. Can
Deputy
anyone
Jones?
remember?
Chair, my recollection, to answer Board Member Straight's question through you, my recollection is you were pretty clear that you wanted a certain percentage of a discretionary increase of the WPU plus what, because back then too, we didn't know what the inflationary rate is. It was just an estimate, right? So then you said plus that too. There was a motion made, I believe by Board Member Belknap, where she said, you know, she's pretty much said it like that. I probably don't have the exact words, but it was along the lines of this amount plus whatever the inflationary rate is at some, you know, when we know that for sure, if that makes sense, so.
All right, well, go ahead.
So I guess what does the group think is a better strategy with the 4%? To break it out, or to leave it on as it is here? Because I don't know what the better strategy is, but that is a great point, so I'll end it there.
Let's go to our next slide and see what people think. Member Bogus was up next, and then back to Member Davis. Let's see, yeah. And then Vice Chair Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask rhetorical questions, if that's okay. I think we need to ask ourselves the question, do the programs that need funding get funding when we ask for this kind of unrestricted funds? Because there are people who speak with me who say we need to make sure this gets funded, but it's not funded through the WPU, it's funded through line item funding. And so I think we just need to consider that. And then I would also ask the question, based upon the information that's been delivered today, is this too big of an ask? Because the information delivered causes me to reflect and think maybe someone might call us unreasonable, and maybe I have misunderstood the information presented. And if that's the case, Mr. Jones, please admonish me privately. But that's just how I've received the information, and so I would just ask us to consider those questions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, I actually would make an amendment to this motion. I would amend the 8% to a 4%. I think we're not looking realistically when we're asking for 8%, almost laughably. When we understand the financial movement forward, I think 4% is a realistic request, and I think based on the other things, especially if we're asking for extracurricular with the 1.5, which I think is a fair ask, I think that's realistic. Oh, I spoke to it, and I didn't even. I'd like to make a motion we change 8 to 4.
Is there a second? Second, a couple seconds. So you have spoken. Anything further to the?
Well, the other thing is as I've talked to a variety of people, the 13%, people are just like, what are they thinking, kind of a thing, and just a little bit out of touch there is what it looks like. I think we can ask for this. I think we've got other things we're asking for with other fundings, and I think a little bit what Board Member Bogus said, that those other priorities too with this, I think this is reasonable. I think this is, especially with economy and stuff going on right now, that this is a reasonable ask, so.
Okay, Member Klein, then Lear, and then Davis to the amended motion.
I would support the amended motion. I feel like if families are having to tighten their belts, that we should too, and we shouldn't just keep asking for more and more off the backs of our families. It's just, yeah, it's not right. So we need to be, if we're in a downturn, we need to act like it and not just keep spending through the roof.
Thank you, Member Klein. Member Lear. Sure.
So you,
Legislators, when we're up at the Capitol presenting, what's the
others than legislators, I don't need to know more.
the governor's?
I don't need to
Group.
know where
Oh.
you were or why you were there. Other people other than legislators?
Yeah, the planning and
Staff
budget.
members of
so
legislators.
the governors, yeah. Is that okay with you?
Because I'm kind of astounded that we have all the local board members, and we've done this several times now today, but we have all these local board members who we profess to work with, be our first choice of partners, and value their input, and they actually serve the students. And they've said thoughtfully 8%, and then because legislators, people say 4%, that's crazy, what are you thinking? Then we say, okay, 4%. I personally will stick with my partners who serve students and know what they need. I don't think they're asking for pie in the sky. And I don't need to ask Jenny any more questions. Thank you very much for, I don't think they're less thoughtful than we are. I don't think they're less informed than we are. I think they're very informed, and I think they're on the ground level of education, where we're a couple of steps removed. So I feel like unless the education partners stand together, that we can't accomplish what we need to for children. So I personally will go with the, support Brent's motion.
So your
and
vote would be no on this then?
That would be no on your amendment, yes, because I believe unless we stand with these people who do the daily work of education, we are being a super legislature, or maybe we're being a pandering to the legislature. I'm not sure which, but I will stand with the people who do the work and know what they need.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Davis.
I move to divide the question.
In what way?
To vote separately on,
It's amendment. There's only one.
I think all we have is the 4%.
oh, then do you want, can I yield my
So
time?
she kept that and amended, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's only an amendment to this, and then you can divide it out.
Okay, then I'll speak to the amendment. I think 4 is too low. 8 may be too high, but 4 is too low. To ask, because we have this conversation every year, and then ultimately, we usually end up with more revenue than we think, but I'll speak against the amendment.
Okay. Member Norton.
And I would speak in favor of the motion. I dearly think that the USBA is wonderful, and I know that they're speaking for educators everywhere. At the same time, as I look at the numbers and I see those trends going down, that says if this is my personal budget and the income is going down, I don't get everything even that I need. I have to cut my budget. I have to make changes. And I think that's where we are. I would love to have it be something different, but we all hear it every day. You know, the economy is struggling, and we as a nation have got to tighten our belts, and I agree with that. I will be very disappointed if the legislature comes in with another tax cut with this. I think that we all need to be very careful with our budgets and move forward. I also want to address the JLC, because I was there when they made that vote, and I heard numerous board members around me saying, it's too high. It's too high. It's too much. We're not going to get that. And I think that's reasonable. And I think that we go in with more credibility when we go in there trying to be reasonable. And I feel like, based on the information we just heard, we need to adjust that number.
Thank you. Member Booth.
To amend the amendments? Can I?
You can't.
Well, let's see.
Or
It's only a number, and in amending the number, you actually change the.
a substitute amendment?
That, I think, would be in order. There's a motion to amend. Well, Have I lost track? Hold on, let's get our parliamentarian here. Sorry. What would be the nature of the motion, Randy? We can remember.
It would be 6% rather than 4%. Just listening to what we heard today, it would still be hopeful. And at the top, we're going in there. It's not like we're taking the hard work
Hold
of
on.
many days of deliberation of JLC and saying, well, we're going to cut you 50%, but we're inching down closer to what, there's no question that the legislators are going to tighten
So-
our belts for us.
Let me just see if we've got that in order and if there's a second, and then we can speak to it.
Okay.
That's my question. So if the motion to amend was to change 8 to 4, is a substitute motion changing 4 up to
Change
6
the 4%.
in order?
Can't substitute. Okay.
I don't think so, but maybe you can amend. Let's see. Hold on, folks. That's why we have our experts, so we don't have to wrestle it out in the pit here. We'll defer to our experts. That's okay. We're discussing whether there was the original motion from Member Straight said 8% for LEA flexibility, 4% inflation, 1.5% fees. Member Earl brought a motion to amend to reduce the 8% on the top line to 4% for LEA flexibility. So that was pending. Member Booth would like to amend or substitute to put 4% back up to 6% for LEA flexibility. And we're figuring out whether that would be in order as either an amendment to Member Earl's motion to amend or as a substitute to the motion to amend. Is that clear as mud?
And we're just speaking for the kids who can't speak for
It's-
themselves.
We can't
And,
speak until we have a motion, though. Hold on
Oh, I'm
just a
not-
sec.
sorry.
I want to just see if it's in order. Sorry. We got to.
That was my motion.
It went from 8 to 4. Question is,
I just changed the 8 to a 4. That was the only part of the motion.
so would
In
it
changing
be?
that to 6, it changes the whole motion.
So what you see now is 4% was 8%. Member Earl's motion to amend was to reduce it to 4%. Would an amendment or substitute to bring it back up to 6 be in order? That's the question. Does that change the entire substance of Member Earl's amendment because it's limited to that line? And if so, would it be appropriate as a substitute? We'll get a ruling here and then we can, yeah, we got a little bit of time. We got a little flexibility in there. While they're looking at that, could I perhaps just ask the maker a quick question? Member Straight was the original maker. While we're looking at the does this include any change in rolling things up into the WPU, or is it just a statement of WPU amount as it currently exists? Okay, in the WPU currently. There's no roll up going on here, in other words. Okay, that was my assumption.
Separating it, for example, if you want to have general and curricular fees, you say, we agree with that.
Your mic is not on.
That would be a different motion, though. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I wasn't going to ask, but since we're waiting on a parliamentary ruling. I would think it works as a substitute to the motion to amend, because like you say, it changes your nature, but that's a substitute to the motion to amend. Yeah.
But if your motion is amended,
All right, we have a ruling or an answer. Thank you. We can do it as an amendment to the amendment? Okay. So do we have the motion to amend the amendment is to change 4% LEA flexibility to 6%. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded over here. Member Booth, you spoke a bit to the motion. Anything to add? Speaking to the motion. We found out we have a little bit of flexibility in up till maybe Superintendent Dixon can, we actually have till 5:30. They knew us well enough to hedge by a half hour. So Member Booth. Oh,
Just speaking positively and proactively for the children who can't speak for themselves. And I don't mind having people say it's too much, if it is too much. But I don't want to give away the baby with the bathwater just because they're saying, I mean, they're definitely worth the 6%, no matter how tough times are. And I'll pay more taxes, or I'll do whatever's got to be done to get, if this is what is needed for us to continue to provide public education, I'd recommend that we go on the high end, and then they can cut us down to size, as they will anyway. Thank you.
all right. Further discussion, back to Member Straight. The motion on the floor is to increase from 4 back up to 6%.
I think that's a good place to settle. I'm going to support it, so I call the question.
We can call the question. We've got, sorry. Well, if you call the question, we have to tee it up. And if it fails, then we come back and we'll debate. So question's been called on the motion to amend to raise from 4 to 6%. Can we tee that up for a vote?
Do we have to vote on calling the question?
Yeah, that's what we're voting on. So this is to call the question. Requires 2/3. If I lost my mind, 2/3. Yes, requires 10 votes. If it passes, then we move straight to a vote on the question of moving back up from 4% to 6%. Voting is open. Oh, sorry. Yes, Member Bogus. Right. Member Heimus, are you on? The question is whether to call the question.
Yes, I am on, and yes to calling the question.
Okay, thank you. Got a couple more, we have 3 more who haven't voted. Are we missing one? Missing Member Carey, so that motion fails. It's 9-5, which is not sufficient to carry. The noes are Lear, Moss, Bogus, Klein, and Earl. So we're back to discussing the motion that was pending, which is the motion for Member Booth to increase from 4% back up to 6%. And I think we've got Member Bogus, Straight, and Davis with lights on. Are you all in line for addressing the motion? Okay, Member Bogus.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to thank Member Booth for his remarks, because our kids do have needs inside our schools, and I get that. And I do understand that. My biggest concern is that we have a lot of line item asks, and we are asking and asking and asking, and we have programs that come out with less than we ask for, and then they don't function the way we want them to function because they're underfunded. And then we complain that they're underfunded. And I know somewhere in here is this nuanced dance of chaos. And I have to hand it to Superintendent Jones and to Director Uri for how they get their jobs done. But I personally think, considering our line item asks, we are asking too much. And so I would speak against the motion.
Thank you, Member Straight, then Member Davis. And then Member Earl. Member Straight.
I know, I just want
Oh,
the
we got
wait
you.
to be recognized.
Okay, sorry, we got you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just a point that I made last time when we had this discussion. The 1.5% for curricular fees, that's really a tax cut. That's a tax cut for parents. At one point, I remember I had kids in high school, junior high, elementary all at the same time. Especially those high schoolers, just getting into school was, for that free education we get provided was quite a bit. And so I think it's good for families. It's good family positive tax cuts. And so I think the messaging on this isn't all just for us. It's for our constituents who have children. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Davis.
I think this is a really good middle ground. 8 felt high, 4 felt too low. But once this passes or fails, I don't know. I mean, I intend to try to divide the question because I don't think that the 1.5 should be included in the top number because it's a big if. That's only if. So I'd rather phrase it as if we're asking for the 6. Just our numbers, are we asking for the 6 in addition to the inflationary factor and the 63 million only if the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees? That's a big if, and I don't want it to look like, we're asking them to do that at this time, but if they do, we would want the money included. But I would speak for the motion for the 6.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Wood.
I appreciate Member Bogus's comments regarding the other line item asks, and I would hope if we do pass this, and I will be voting for the 6%. I was once told it took 2.5% to open the doors and turn the lights on, so we're giving 1.5% flexibility. Our schools need more than that, so I'd hope that we would pare down our asks and realize that flexibility for our LEAs is the most critical. That's where we pay our teachers, that's where we pay our custodians and our bus drivers and all those other important people in our schools that support our students and their learning. And so just like we don't like the line items programs that the legislature sometimes forces upon us, I hope we look at our asks and realize that maybe we need to prioritize flexibility.
All right, thank you, Member Wood. I think we can, Member Vice Chair Earl?
Okay, so just based on some of the comments, are you saying we're going to make this the only priority we have? Because if are these other priorities, do you see what I'm saying? Or are we prioritizing the other 12 items as well? And so that's my concern is if we're saying that this 6% is what we're going to ask, and then we're going to also ask number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, 97. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm looking at this more of a realist or whatever, that I think the reality is that the 4%, and if we're asking for the 1.5 for curricular, it didn't eliminate that is a reasonable, more than a reasonable ask. And I just think it's not a matter of, I think we've got to look at what is out there and what is available for us, which is significantly less than what even the 4% is asking. But anyways, I just think we need to be thoughtful about that. And if we're going to say this is our priority ask, then we've got to eliminate some of the others too.
All right, so the motion as written does not include any effect on the priorities, but members can make that choice as part of their consideration of what the WPU vote is, right? And so just to be clear, the motion does not include striking anything from our priority list, but let's take some votes. I think we need to move to some policy items because we are presenting to the Ed Interim Committee next week on policy proposals. So we have on the floor the motion from Member Booth to increase back from 4% up to 6% for LEA flexibility in addition to the other 2 items listed. With that, let us vote. And actually, before it's on the 6, everything else is there. I will just say our kids are worth 25, 30%. I'm also, concerned that we be realistic. The legislature doesn't have its own money; it only has taxpayers' money. And when it's not there, it's not there. And that's my only reason for voting anything less than 1,000%. So that's where I sit. But let's tee it up for a vote. So again, it's the vote.
Hymas is a yes.
Hymas is a yes, and the vote is to move from 4 back up to 6%. let's see, I think we may have everybody who's here. So that fails. It is a tie vote 7-7. Not having 8 votes, the motion fails. That puts us back to Member Earl's, I'm sorry. Member Earl's amendment, which was to reduce 8% down to 4%. That's all right. So member Earl's motion is on the floor, which was reducing the initial 8% for LEA flexibility from Member Straight down to 4%. So if we could just put that up there, but maybe it's clear enough. Does somebody have the screen? We could change 6 to 4. It's up at 6 still, but maybe we know. There we go. Okay, yes, we're voting on 4%. So the amendment was going back to Member Earl's motion, reducing 8 to 4 on LEA flexibility. Voting is open. Member Hymas?
Yes.
Hymas is a yes. I have 2 left. Nope, that covers it. That passes by 8-6. The noes being Member Reel, Member Lear, Member Straight, Member Wood, Member Booth, and Member Davis. So we have the vote on the WPU. Let's see, that takes us, actually, I think that might be.
We need to do the whole vote now.
I guess we do know, yeah, we need to go back and do the whole thing. So, Member Straight's motion as amended is that the board directs staff to revise the WPU legislative funding request to include 9.5% increase for the WPU for the upcoming legislative session, broken down as follows: 4% for LEA flexibility, discretionary increase, 4% for the inflationary increase, and 1.5% for general and curricular school fees. So if we could just change the 13 to a 9 and the 8 to a 4.
Yeah, right there.
There we go. That one had it. Yep. Okay, there we go. That's our motion. Member Davis, would you like to speak to that motion now?
Someone turn it on.
Oh.
I have a question for the motion maker. I mean, are we asking them for the 1.5% for general and curricular fees, or are we wording it like JLC did and saying 1.5% if the legislature eliminates curricular fees? Because it really changes the top number. It's a potential 9 point whatever is up there now.
My understanding, and maybe we take this back to the original maker, Member Straight, was that this is designated a request of 1.5 for the purpose of curricular fees, meaning if they eliminate curricular fees. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
If.
that's what it
So
was.
it's intended to mirror the JLC's.
Yes. Although I was open for changes, but none of those changes were ever pursued.
Okay. So that's the motion. It's essentially in the same nature as the JLC's, but with a different top line number.
I have a question.
Member Davis?
Would it be a friendly amendment then to change the top to say potential 9.5? I mean, realistically, we're only asking for 4%. 4's already done. The 1.5 is totally hypothetical, so we're really only asking for 4.
I think that captures the state of the motion correctly. Is there a friendly that, are you adding a? Where would you add potential? Well, right. So this is what's, we got this member Earl language teed up. Where would we have a motion on the floor. Are we trying to add the word, we've got about 10 minutes, so are we trying to add the word potential to include a potential 9.5 increase? Is that a friendly, Member Straight? I think it's your so I think Member Davis is suggesting that we say to include a potential 9.5% increase, potential referring to the conditional nature of the 1.5 curricular fees request. Am I getting that right? A potential, well, let's just see if this is, or I got to manage this because we got 10 minutes. Sorry?
Maybe they do.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
there we go. That's got it.
Okay, thank you for that. I
All right.
appreciate that.
And is that a friendly, Member Straight, friendly amendment? The word a potential? Any objection?
I have a question that I would like to direct.
Okay, but no
please.
objection? All right, so it's been amended to include potential. Member Bogus with a question.
Sir, I would like to ask Superintendent Jones if he could do his job without all these extra words, or if these words are necessary for him to do his job.
It's a pretty broad cosmic question. Go ahead, Superintendent Jones. Go ahead. He was in Afghanistan. He can do his job with his hands behind his back. Sorry, go ahead, Member Deputy Jones. We got it.
So, Chair Moss, the answer to Board Member Bogus' question is yes, we can. We can do, the thing is that in your next agenda item, you're going to see how the board came out in the survey on their priorities. I know a lot of board members ask, well, why do we even go through all this with the percentage, determining a percentage amount? Because when you make a proposal by law, the Budgetary Procedures Act, to the governor's office, if you don't have a percentage, then you're basically saying, hey, well, we'll take whatever the governor proposes, right? Initially, with it too. But we can do our job, we can make all the forecasts, because I really feel strongly that even if you land on a percentage right now, Chair Moss, that you'll still have time to amend it as we get closer, we get more information on revenue, see what the governor's proposal is, and that there'll be time to do that. So the short answer is yes, we can do our job.
May I, small follow-up?
Sure.
I'm actually speaking about the words potential and if, because those seem to be, we're debating those, and I'm just asking, like, the numbers would stay the same, but
Right.
do we need to debate those for you to go and take care of business
Oh,
effectively?
No, so Chair Moss, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, so the answer to that question is no, you don't need to debate those. I understand the question now. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. The motion with the friendly amendment is that the board directs staff to revise the WPU legislative funding request to include a potential 9.5% increase for the WPU for the upcoming legislative session, broken down as follows: 4% for LAA flexibility, 4% for the inflationary increase, and 1.5% if the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees. Member Straight, did you have a final comment or just looking to vote? Okay.
What I put out there is understood. So to include a potential 9.5% increase, if the legislature said we're just going to eliminate the 1.5 right now, then we still could possibly anticipate a 9.5% increase. I just wanted to say that was my interpretation of that, so that there's no question it later before we take a vote.
Okay. Final comment, Member Booth.
Just a little thought as you're getting ready to vote. Those whose districts you represent, certainly parents are a big part of that, but those who have to deliver, are administrators, educators, teachers. If the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees, great, but that really doesn't impact the work that the administrators, the superintendents, the teachers the people that are making it happen. It does not impact what they have to do. They have to work on the 8% to deliver what they have to deliver. And if parents don't have to pay the 1.5, great, that's terrific. But you're representing these educators who've got to do a job, and if the 1.5 is going to reduce what they just don't care. And they'll be happy if it happens, but if it doesn't happen, they still have to deliver on the 8%. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Booth. Did we get Member Davis? Sorry, we skipped you.
Her thing isn't, oh, she's on.
Yeah, I would like to, can I amend the amendment? Are we on amendment? Can I make an amendment? Okay,
I think we're down to a single motion pending, so yes.
okay. I would like to, add, I'm doing a lot of math in my head right now, 1.5% on the, discretionary increase in lieu of item number 66, 76, 8, oh, never mind, 2%. I would like to add 2% on the flexibility discretionary increase in lieu of item number 6, the educator salary adjustment revision, and item number give me an item number 8. Improve predictability in the voted and board local levy programs. That equals about 2% WPU. That each percent is about 40 million, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Is each percent on the WPU about 40 million?
41.
41. So if we remove number 8, the voted and board local levy, and if we remove the educator adjustment, it should get us to that extra 2%. And then be equal in what we're asking overall for the legislature.
Is there a second? Second from Member Straight. Would you like to speak further to the motion, Member Davis?
Yeah, I think the other things are important to look at, but they might have to wait till next year, because the reality is the inflationary increase is based on a 5-year rolling index, and we are dealing with upwards of 7-8% this last year. So, just to stay status quo, it's going to take a decent amount of money, and it sounds like we may not be getting as much money as we're hoping to get. And so I think if we have to prioritize, and this is why we should never prioritize before we set a WPU amount, but since we did, I'm going to move to put it into the flexible dollars and take it away from the other two, and those will have to wait till next year.
Okay, we had a second. Any further discussion of the motion? Point. Okay. I think it was number 6 on the chart.
It's priority 8 and priority 6.
So one of those is ongoing and one of those is one time, Member Davis.
Here's the question that I have.
I'm just curious how that fits in.
Those are just priorities. We haven't voted to make any of those priorities yet. So right now, only boards are voting stuff. We don't have 2
We got 2 minutes.
I can move to take
Let's,
these off of the table.
let me just remind the board members, we are appearing in front of Ed Interim.
As supported.
Well, let's see. Where are we presenting the WPU and our priorities? That in PEA on Tuesday, and then policy items at Interim Ed on Wednesday? Where's is the WPU amount going up to PEA on Tuesday? Where that's going into the governor's office then. The deadline there is the governor's office, which the deadline for which is tomorrow, okay? So, all right, we got to do it. All right, can we, let's see if we can tee up a vote on Member Davis, and then if not, on the underlying motion. Again, we do have the opportunity to amend, have the opportunity to revise as revenue numbers come in. We do have a statutory obligation, deliver recommendation to the governor. We're a little bit out of the conversation if we don't deliver something. And we do have policy proposals that we need to tee up for interim ed standing committee next Wednesday. Member Earl?
I just want a clarification. So Cindy, you're only wanting 8 items on our priority list, right? We're by doing this, I'm asking if we're taking some of those other priorities off. To 10, okay. So that's what I'm asking. I'm seeking clarity that we have only a number of priorities by taking 2 of these off. Am I understanding that?
We haven't voted at all for which ones, but this would take these 2 off of the table for consideration. And then if we need to take it down to 10 instead of 12 to make it overall look better,
Okay, that's what
I'm willing to do that.
I had understood we were voting for 12, but taking 10 up to the hill is our priority.
We didn't vote for that. We voted for 12, to take 12.
Did we vote to take 12 or to vote for 12? Well, we got to vote somewhere.
voted
Okay,
to
my
take 12.
understanding was we ranked 12, and that would help us decide the top 10. Whatever
This
the
could
motion
take it
is
down to 10.
governs. Okay, all right.
I mean, if that will help this to pass,
No,
let's take it down to 10.
Whatever the motion is, it says what it says. I had thought that we ended up with 10 after voting for 12, but whatever this would do, it would reduce 2 of those, either from 12 to 10, 10 to 8. So do we have it teed up? And one of those is ongoing, one of them is one time. Number 6 was estimated or allocated for ongoing funding of 13 million. Number 8 was allocated $66 million in one-time funding.
Just again, Chair, to clarify, we haven't voted on any of those. Those came out in our individual prioritized list.
Right.
What we did vote on is that we would take 12 to the Hill.
Okay, if
So
that's
I
what
will
it is,
add
that's
to
what it is.
mine, I'll add to my motion right now that we only take 10.
Okay, well, and if it says 12, it says 12. I guess my question is more one-time versus ongoing. So you would strike 6 and 8 from the list.
To be
as-
considered or even supported
Okay.
for this year.
All right, got it. So that's the motion. Let's vote. 6. Go ahead. Member Norton.
Yeah, I just had a concern about the using one-time money to replace WPU money.
That was what I was pointing out. Number 8 is one-time money in the amount of 66 million. So the motion is to eliminate that and instead raise the WPU ask
Right.
by 2%, correct?
82 million,
Okay.
that's an
Let's
ongoing.
clarify,
we'll
and then
vote
we've
it.
got to take some votes here and,
Again, we can take others off the list as well. That's just to start for this motion.
Okay.
And we're going to that next agenda item next where we can remove some of those.
if we get there. Okay. So the motion is to eliminate number 6 and 8 from the prioritized list. Number 6 being the educator salary adjustment revision of ongoing 13 million. Number 8 being the predictability of the voted and board local levy program, which was allocated or voted in the amount of 66 million one time. Let's see. I think we are okay to vote. Let's tee up the vote, and the vote, I think, is open. Oh, Member Hymas?
I'm going to vote no on this one.
Okay. We're still missing one, are we?
Nope. Joseph is gone.
Oh, yeah, right, okay. All right, so with voting closed, that fails. Vote of 8 to 6. The yeses are straight. Booth, Reel, Wood, Lear, and Davis. Okay, so we're back to Member Earl's. No, Member Straight's motion as amended. All right, Member Straight's motion as amended is on the floor that the board directs staff to revise the WPU legislative funding request to include a potential 9.5% increase for the WPU for the upcoming legislative session, broken down as follows: 4% for LEA flexibility, 4% for the inflationary increase, 1.5% if the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees. And let's vote. if we can. Do we have that teed up for a vote? Oh, I'm sorry. Member Straight. Okay.
I would like to take, 1.5.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
We gotcha. Okay, you're on.
So I request that we move the 1.5%, that we support it, but we move it out of our WPU discussion and increase the 4% to 6%.
Okay. That's in order. So the motion to amend would be to strike from the motion the 1.5% if the legislature eliminates general and curricular fees, and to increase the 4% for LEA flexibility to 6%. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay, and do we have a second? Okay, discussion to that motion. I don't think I'm seeing any, so we can vote, I believe. All right, voting is open. Member Hymas?
Yes.
Hymas is a yes. Member Hart? Hmm? Hymas was a yes. So that passes. Oh, hang on, we got one more. Nope, we lost Member Carey. That motion passes 10-4, the no votes being Earl, Bogus, Klein, and Moss. So that is the motion as amended. Let us bring that back to the floor. Member Straight's motion is that the board direct staff to revise the WPU legislative funding request to include a potential 10%, potential 10% increase for the WPU for the upcoming legislative session, broken down as follows: 6% for LEA flexibility and 4% for the inflationary increase. We've had discussion to that. Seeing no sorry. Chair Hymas.
Yes.
Chair Hymas is a yes. Oh, thought I voted. Excuse me. I'm a yes. That passes by 10-4. And I think that was an amendment. No, that was, yes, that was amendment. We have one more vote. No, that covers it?
Well, that's what was passed. Well, that's what was.
I thought I might ask for a pony too. Is that what you're asking, Member Lear?
Well, no, but I wanted to ask what the board told us to ask.
All right, adjourn.
Member Lear, hold on. Member Lear, that's how it works. You vote, we pitch.
Right, every time.
Yes, exactly right. Okay, let's see. I don't know if we have time for anything else. We got to roll. So do we have the ability to consider policy requests tomorrow? AAG Buse?
She needs to be
Oh,
turned on.
turn her on.
Yes, unlike last time, when you asked if we could move things to the next day, we did notice that tomorrow we would have a continuation of this general session. And so the things that you still have on your agenda unfinished, if you adjourn right now under Robert's rules, will move to tomorrow during that general session time that we noticed already.
Thank you, and thank you for thinking ahead for us. That's great to hear. Final motion. Go for it. Oh.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Been trying for like 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. Okay, we are adjourned. Let's go celebrate.